Chapter 3 The Initials. "Is this your first pair of new shoes?" Kyle asked it after I did a fancy piece of footwork I once saw Ray Butcher do live on stage. "Definitely not," I replied. "Then made to measure?" I didn't love this moving. I didn't trust it. They say it's women who love to gossip, but in my experience, men love it just as much. They just do it differently. They hide it behind short sentences and direct questions. What did Kyle care about my experience with shoes? I wondered. Probably just to figure out my past, and that was none of his business. Then I told myself it didn't matter because I didn't care what he thought. I didn't care much for him in general. He might be richer than me at that time, but that's where his superiority ended. He was downright silly. And his attempt to get more from me, to push me to admit something that wasn't true, was lazy and obvious. Never approve of a lazy man. They gave us boots in the war, I replied. Kyle just nodded then, because he didn't know what to do with that information. He was a year younger than me. Hadn't fought, hadn't signed up like I had. Hadn't lied about his age to fight for his country like I had. How could he say to answer like that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. 1917. The Great War, our first World War, started overseas in 1914. I was just 13 years old at the time, but of course I was a smart lad, and my father didn't keep news of the world from me. "An informed mind is a strong mind," he said. This is probably why when the United States declared it war on Germany in April 1917, just a few weeks shy of turning 16, I lied about my age and signed myself up. It is easy enough to lie, and the war effort, I truly think, didn't mind it. If they could tell I was underage, they certainly didn't say anything about it, and I think they could see I was strong and capable with a useful, rational mind. I joined the Signal Corps, apparently because it's not too far away from home in New Jersey, and also because I was most interested in communications, and that was definitely the place to be. It's not what we have much of a choice as privates. It's just that I've always been rather decent at telling people what I want and somehow getting it. Upon arrival for basic training, our measurements were taken. We were issued uniforms. It's the first time I have given a pair of boots my father hadn't made. I never before had anything on my feet. I hadn't been Drew. Joey Drew is not known for his modesty, despite his claims to contrary, but I will say rather decent is an understatement in this case. In his hands. It's a strange sensation. I don't mind telling you, and it definitely made me all the more impressive with my father's handiwork. The boots had been worn in already. They had been buffed and polished it, and certainly we were expected to maintain them as much, but I could already tell these were previously owned it. "You have a problem, Private?" Sergeant O'Malley had asked in his gruff voice. His vocal cords had been encroached by years of smoking and shouting, like cheese shredder on the grinder. "No, sir," I replied it, standing tall and true, back stiff, arms at my side. Even before basic training, I knew how to show respect. "Good, now change." I joined my fellow soldiers inside the large, early gym. Half the men were already in their whites. Some were already in uniform, having changed at the speed that I felt showed thoughtlessness, not eagerness. Our uniforms were standard issue and quite different from what they wear nowadays. Back then wore a simple long-sleeve green shirt beneath the green wool jacket that went to the hips, 4 pockets on the front, 2 at the chest, 2 at the waist level. They buttoned up all the way to the throat. No collar, though some of the fellows followed the top down, not during the expectation, of course. On our heads, one felt campaign hat with a broad brim. Not a look I'll say that suited everyone, but it did me. I often joke back that I would go to Canada and become a Mountie because I looked so swell in it. The trousers were the same rough hole as the jacket, and those were tacked into either green or hockey spats or painters. Same difference. Our boots were what I normally call shoes. In fact, I rather them have many times by mistake. The army wanted them to be called the boots, though. And I always thought it has to be make them sound more hardly. Words matter. They change how we see things. But to give the army some credit, they were much harder than my own father's shoes. Thick at the toe, heavy all round. Walking day and night in these boots definitely worn you out. But they also help you into excellent shape. That is to say, when Sergeant O'Malley wasn't putting us through drills. I put the boots on last and noticed a small scab on the toe that I wiped it out with my jacket sleeve. That's when I saw the initials, CW. I'll be honest, I said at first I didn't think they were letters. Thought it was a scratch that happened to look that way. So of course I didn't pay much attention except to feel frustrated that I had been given boots with such an imperfection in the first place. I made friends easily as I started my training. 2 men in particular, only a few years older than me, stand out in my mind, Private Donaldson and Private Eggart. These lads share my sense of humor and also my fascination with the telegraph and more newly invented radio systems. We often teamed together to practice putting the tall, thin communication tower which was bolstered by cables on 3 sides. Usually someone else has sent with the wire across the field while we 3 worked it flawlessly as a team. When they were shipped overseas, I generally missed them. They were the first gents I ever met who could convince me to go out and spend the evening dancing and socializing instead of studying. They showed me that there was something positive about escaping the daily grind that way. I met Joey the following year in the lab. Only briefly I had the chance to meet these 2. They were every bit the characters Joey describes them to be. Pretty sure Lolly would say yes if you asked. Donaldson was convinced he could find me a sweetheart, even when I said I wasn't interested in one. Just going to the party, I replied it. Come on, Joey, boy. She's quite a looker. Eggart was always supporting Donaldson in every crazy scheme. They have grown together in Queens, signed it up together, and then, as casually Liz described it, died together. I thought it was a good they had been together at the end, and the perfect circle to their story brought full round has nothing to do with looks. I had once tried to explain to them that it wasn't that I didn't like girls or I didn't enjoy their company. I didn't have time for them. I didn't want to go out on nights I need to stay in. I didn't want to waste any hard-earned money on gifts. I knew it was selfish, but that was the point. I was being selfish. I knew it. And I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We met up with Lottie and her friends that night at the dance floor on the base. I will say that was something different. You had to remember this, it was 1917. Girls didn't really go out and about on their own without everyone at that point. Well, at least not the kind of girls you brought home to mother. As they said, there always is escort, a brother or father or some or aunt, squeezed into a formal dress in the dark supper color. But these were unique times. They were also unique conditions. And these were definitely unique girls. They were nicknamed the Hello Girls, and were among the very first women to ever work in communications. They were trained as switchboard operators at the facility. Then they were shipped overseas to London or Paris to help with the communication with the boys at the front. They were nicknamed this because, of course, they answered every call coming to them with a cheerful hello. These girls were invited to any dance hosted on base, and they didn't need chaperones because they were considered both their dates and their guardians. We looked out for our girls. That isn't to say romance didn't blossom and hearts weren't broken, but we have a respect for these brave women serving the cause. Like nurses, these impressive women were a very important part of the war effort. And while some of the boys in the group would say it was a shame the girls had to work, and the others saw them as a little more than a dance or a walk in the dark, it was the moment that helped it build the foundation for my hiring practices at the studio. Even now, I'm told it's strange how I had so many women in high positions, but I just say it's about the work, and that's all. My mother did the books. The Hello Girls served their country. That's all that matters. We were a bit late when Donaldson flung open the dance hall doors in his typical dramatic fashion. There was a light everywhere. The ladies were in their best dresses, and the men still in uniform. The ladies were allowed to be in civilian dressed for the dances. The music was loud and full of life, couples on the floor dancing to a ragtime rhythm being played by the army band. This made me grin. How I love music. I grabbed Lottie's hand, asking her to dance while getting her to the floor. "You're not a band dancer," she shouted above the music. Even with her talking loud, it was hard. It was hard to hear her. Her voice was sweet and high. "I know," I replied with a grin. She grinned back. I know, I'm not supposed to talk about women grinning. There's always a reaction to the word when I use it to describe Alice reacting to something Bendy's done. People prefer just a smile. But dang it all, if Lottie didn't grin, she was some kind of special. "Where do you learn it then?" she asked. "I don't know. I'm just good at picking things up. I danced in the living room with my mother as a kid, but it was true. Mostly it was just watching others and copying them. Like we all know, copying for the life is what I do best." We finished the dance and moved to the side of the room, sitting at a round table with a yellowish tablecloth and small clear vase with some wildflowers inside. Donaldson was sitting with Angela, and Eggard vanished somewhere with Tilly. "Not bad, you two. You should start a vaudeville act," said Donaldson. Lottie laughed, and I shook my head with a smile. "What will we be called?" she asked it. Donaldson thought for a bit too long. He was never the creative type. Before he heard himself, I said, "The Private and Miss Lottie." She turned to me, did her grin, and say, "I love it!" There was something in her smile that made me think, "Joseph, time to change the subject." So I stood up, extended my hand, inviting her for the other dance. She took it and glanced down it. "Your lace isn't tied." I looked down, and it was. Hardly the big news item of the day. "Oh, it is? Let me." She bit down, and I tinned down too. I didn't need her to help with my laces. I was too much of a gentleman to allow her to do such a thing. No, Lottie, please." We met face to face at my shoe. It was one of those moments you see in movies, when you realize how close your face is to the other person's. In the other situation, this might have been a romantic one. She gazed down, a blush going to her ears, and that's when she saw the letter on my boot. "What are these?" she asked it, as I gingerly took the laces from her gentle grip. "They were there when I got them," I replied. She touched them with her gloved finger and said quietly, almost to herself, "Unusual initials." "Yes," I said. She seemed shaken up about her arriving then, stood upright and jutted heavily. I quickly tied the laces and, instead of moving to the dance floor, sat down too, joining my table mates again. We didn't talk about the initials after that, and we didn't dance together again for the rest of the night. I didn't think something had changed between us. I was pretty sure she was still sweet on me. I didn't think much more about the dance after the fact. To be honest, I'm quite forgotten all about it until one day, sitting in the mess hall, I suddenly noticed that I wasn't alone. I didn't eat alone every day, but I'd always been a man of a quiet contemplation, and some moments were rare. During training, I had noticed I find a corner under the large fan that was a little too windy for most, even on the hot days. When I chose to sit there, I did, noting no one else would be joining me, not even Dodson or Eggard. Lot, on the other hand, hadn't counted for. Indeed, the girls are usually ate somewhere else, somewhere closer to the communication building, I assumed. When I saw her sitting opposite of me, I instantly turned to look at the fellow recruits. Even though they were paying close attention to their strict beans, I could tell all eyes were on me. This is definitely something you learn fast. If you want people to notice you, have a beautiful woman on your arm. "Now, what are you doing here, Lottie?" I asked it. She grinned at me, because of course she did. I had been thinking a lot about CW. That draw a blank, and I thought maybe she was talking in code or something she learned it in her short class. "What?" The most use of the W questions, and I think of the most useless that Brink said, "I'm not going to lie," and I said I never uttered it. I definitely did that day. "On your shoes. We've been trying to find a soldier with those initials, and it's been hard. Those are pretty unique initials." I nodded and chewed. She was right. CW definitely had a sort of ordinary to it. "So no luck in finding my former footmate then?" I asked it. Lottie laughed and sighed. "No luck." She looked hastily up toward the fan, and I only just noticed how this blowing of loose curled around, making a dance across her forehead. She wasn't leaving, which meant she needed something from me, and since I wasn't about to declare my love for her or ask her for a stroll, the best I could do was to come up with something to cooperate to this conversation. "Well, you have a look at the women?" I asked it. "The women?" "Or girls. Maybe they were the initial of a sweetheart. If so, chances are she wasn't here. She was from his hometown, but if you're looking for the more fun with this, maybe she trained it here too. Her grin got extra wide and stood up in a rush. Yes! Oh, Joseph, you're so smart. I'm going to begin inquiries indirectly. She has been followed to the back, and I have no doubt she'll have given me a hug, maybe even the kiss on the cheek. But remember, this was still the time of the time corsets, and emotionally restrained. So all she had done was to turn pretty much a full circle in her excitement, and had leave a big wave and a thank you. The game started now. Who was CW? And the time Lottie and I saw each other, I get a special report, like I was her commanding officer. It took me a while to realize it, but I started to understand her devotion to the game. More and more of us was getting set overseas, our friends, our family, and more we getting a word back about what is happening over there. It was dark times, and some entertainment, even in the former initials, was welcome. It's fine. We eventually decided that CW has to be the lover of the former owner of these boots of mine. She didn't work as the hello girl. Lottie had made sure of that, combing through all the female names she could find on the base. So it must have been a sweetheart from home. We concluded. Well, Lottie concluded. I just played along. We decided our male main character was named John, and he wore these boots in training, and when he was shipped overseas, got a standard issue pair. That was a useful lie to tell ourselves, because I think we both thought darker thoughts about the previous owner and how it came to have his footwear. We also decided his lover's name Silda, and because she has an extravagant name, we give her a flaming red hair. He was handsome and blonde. She was striking and fair. He loved her, but he was poor. She loved him, but she was rich. It could never be. But they wrote to each other long, complicated love letters, quoting Shakespeare and Keats. I have no problem admitting now that I did not know my Shakespeare and Keats at the time, but I knew they were writers and I knew intellectuals talk about them, so I was happy to suggest the latter when she suggested the former. In the next letter, maybe she managed to convince her brother that she really loves him, Lottie said once as we strolled around the training grounds. During a rare half-hour break, we managed to coordinate it. Maybe her brother knew him. Maybe her brother is serving with him, I added. Yes, she said with a dip in her step. Yes, Laura knows nothing of class. Brothers side by side. Brothers in arms. Brothers-in-law, I said like the way that sounded. Oh, Joseph, you have such a way with words, she said, looking at me with her eyes twinkling furiously. I knew I'd taken the risk with this game, and I could see all over her face she was falling in love with me. I took a step out to the side to create a bit more distance between us. Fortunately, the bugle sounded soon after, and we made it to part ways. As luck would have it, she would slip off soon after. She was stationed in London, which made me happy, as I knew the war was on the continent, and, while I might not have been in love with her, I thought of her fondly. She was safe, and I'm glad. For my part, had been assigned to the lab, which was its own unit attached to the training base, and those I was still serving my country in New Jersey. I became quite occupied helping my superiors develop their new technologies, and her letters were a welcome break from all the numbers and equations. She wrote me tales and her new post of London and the quirky English ways. I developed quite a taste for tea and scones, even though they are rare to see these days. There's a young man who works in the communication lab who has a secret stash she shares with me sometimes. I liked that she found herself a beaut, or at least someone to give her some attention. Her letters were warmly welcomed by me, but I noticed how the tune in them shifted as weeks and months passed. The days are getting shorter, but the hours grew longer here. I am constantly sending messages to men who then are reported dead the next day. The woman who is in charge of the boarding house is a dear one, but her nephew died last week and she's spending so much time alone in her sitting rooms. The world is in mourning. She's too have a way with words, and her voice got sadder and sadder, darker and darker, till they hid my soul, and I find them dragging me down as well. This is a dark time, Joseph. I have so many dark thoughts. I think sometimes the world will never be right again. There is no time for romance or dancing or high tea. It's all just drink and worrisome. It was too much. I couldn't tell her to stop writing. That wouldn't be fair. I knew my letters were of great comfort because she told me often and praised my ability to turn the phrase. It was when I connected the plan. I remember my father and the elves. I thought about how time passed with help of make-believe, but the world will still be what the world was. Dark and dangerous, but one will make it wondrous again. The next letter I sent her, after detailing the usual how I was and what was happening, I added a new paragraph. And the credible thing has happened, Lottie. I'll admit it, I thought it was all a fun game for us. But you were actually right. C.W. is a real person, is the girlfriend of the former book comparador. His name is not John, it's James, which is I think is pretty darn close to our guess. He came by the base to meet with his former clients, and I happened to be in the lab when he stopped by to say hi to Coral Arch. He has been injured, just his leg, jabled in the cuff, and so was sent home. He said he was lucky to have survived. We talked for a while, and I don't know what made him notice my boots, but he did, and that's when he saw the initials. Zelda, he said. Yes, Lottie, Zelda. Her name is indeed Zelda. What a guess! That one was yours. I must say I was speechless, and you know that doesn't happen to me that often. We got to talking, and through our version of the story was not correct. She and he are both children of the tailors. That's how they met. She's indeed his sweetheart. Well, I just had to tell him about our visual tales, and he loved them so much. He told them he wanted to tell me to tell you hello, and that he hopes you're doing well, and that you should know how much the men and friends appreciate everything you gals are doing for them. We had decided to become pen pals, so I'll keep you posted. When I first read this, I forgot, despite Joey saying as much as it was fiction. I spent far too much time tracking my brain over who this James was. Joey's so good with his storytelling. This even when he tells you it's not real, you can't forget a moment later. Then I continued with the usual sign-off and set the letter on its way. For the first time I was on the tenterhooks, waiting for her reply. Weeks passed it, too slowly, but sure enough, eventually an envelope came with her very recognizable handwriting. Joseph, how marvelous! I never would have thought could be real. So many stories and dreams I had as a child has been dashed in the view of what I see of the world. Now, this is so remarkable, it restores my faith in humanity and in hope. Please tell James that is so close. You are completely correct. And Zelda, imagine her name is truly Zelda. Hello for me. At that point I sighed, such a sign of relief. The make-believe have worked. That's not just for Lottie, it was a fantastic effect on me too. Working in the lab though, fascinating was also mind-boggling. Getting to make up these stories set on my brain place. I started composing letters from James, supposedly transcribed by other fellow lab trainee, Nathan Arch, to Lottie. I sent them with my letters and told her such stories. My return home was one of the best days of my life. My whole family waiting on the platform on the train station. Zelda was standing there holding an English setter puppy in her arms. I don't have any recollection of doing this. Quite quickly, after the two of them had to get married, so I detailed a simple, beautiful wedding at the country church. There were flowers, and the bride had daisies in her hair. Daisies? Oh, James, tell Zelda they are my absolute favorite type of flower. I, of course, knew that. Soon after, a pregnancy was announced, and though I didn't think of the world would continue long enough for a baby to be born, sure enough, it did, and a little boy named Timothy entered into the lives of Zelda and James. I was still keeping on my own real-life correspondences with Lottie, and the difference in her letters was striking. She has been gone from the dark descriptions of dead men and trenches to stories about new friends and finding ways to host parties for patients. She spoke about Navy again. The young man with the scopes, her spirits were raised, and it was all thanks to me and my make-believe. Eventually, the letters become less fragrant. I understand that my part in her show was coming to an end. For that matter, so was James and Zelda's, and her replies to them got shorter, less excited, and I realized that she didn't need us anymore. Her real life was now the new make-believe, her engagement to Davy, her friends in London, and her work, which had once been so heavy on her, was now a source of great pride. When the war ended, I didn't hear from her again. I never got the letter that said goodbye or ended the story in a satisfying way. But as a person who never liked an incomplete tale, I decided to finish for myself in my imagination. I decided that what happened was she had sent such a letter, but it got lost somewhere over the Atlantic. In it, I imagined she told me about her wedding and her small home on the outskirts of the city, big enough to have a garden. Just so lovely, Joseph. You must come visit. I miss you so. I do consider you as a very dear friend that had a memory of you alone makes me grin ear to ear. To think how much we have grown and changed over the years. I must thank you for remarkable friendship. I always thought it was so funny that we all started all because of a pair of boots. How delightful, isn't it? For boots to bliss feels like something you'll write. Well, I must be off. Davy is calling me to tea. So much love, Lottie. I have gone through every piece of responses Joey ever saved as part of any my work placing his memory and documenting his life, and I must confess I was looking forward to reading Lottie's letters in person. Having been moved to tears reading this part of the original manuscript 30 years ago, fortunately, I have not been able to find them. It is possible they were lost to time, and I do deep down hope that to be true. However, even though the story ends being revealed to be one of Joey's excellent fictions, I think it doesn't matter. Joey would, of course, call it another example of his illusion. I think the message in this story is meaningful regardless whether it really happened or not, and regardless if Lolly actually herself existed or not. She is fine embodiment of a brave woman who served our country in war.